Previously on the Beam Chronicles.
Howie thinks this is big enough to reopen the discussion on Tyler Foon joining Ava. After you've been talking to him once a week for a few months.
Once a week?
He married a woman with a 5-year-old little girl. He heard a rumor that his wife was sleeping around with her old husband, shot the ex-husband, then he strangled the wife, then he shot her too, the kid.
What's rule 1, Tyler?
Don't talk about Charlie.
I don't have a choice, and let's face it, you're not exactly going anywhere. You've been trapped in that hole for 2 straight years. You don't have any more saviors coming. Maybe you shouldn't so openly balk at the opportunities for freedom that present themselves to you. There's not exactly a lot of them on the horizon.
These are the Beam Chronicles with your host, MJ Dooney.
Life with Charlie Shea was best described by the microcosmic circumstances that dealing with her forced me into. For example, Charlie was the only person I'd ever met who could make me so blindly furious I'd storm out on her into an elevator, then stand there for 30 seconds, staring at the stack of buttons without the slightest clue which one I wanted to press. Because I didn't just want to go back to my room and sit on it, I wanted to vent, talk to somebody about my problems, and in a dazzlingly incomprehensible yet somehow simultaneously illuminating way, the first thought in my mind was to talk to Charlie. About my fight with Charlie. That was the worst part about arguing with my go-to person. I had nobody to go to about it. Sydney was the obvious next choice, just as foundational to me as Charlie was in most ways, but naturally she had already appropriated him in the room I'd just exited. Or I guess in fairness, I kind of relinquished him. Anyway, eliminating Charlie and Sydney forced me to go down a tier, but I had plenty of tier 2 friends who knew her well enough to be receptive to my decompressing. Murphy, duh. He always had that stabilizing fatherly effect on all 3 of us. I'm sure he'd be glad to lend a friendly ear, talk me down, cool me off. He would have been the perfect guy to bring it up to, but on a Monday before 8, there was no way he was up in his office. Head of equalizations right during prime busting hours and without an appointment. I'd feel awkward whining about this, distracting him via earpiece. And if I was accepting that it wouldn't be in person, I'd rather take it to Caraway. Wait, no, idiot. Worst idea yet. Talking to Maria about Charlie stuff, that wasn't fair. Not to her. And she'd probably deduce we were sleeping together by the end of it, break the secret, break Maria's heart, just pile onto the heap of broken dumbass. Honestly, what was wrong with me? I had reached out my finger to hit the top button, concluding that Phil, while not exactly my closest companion, was friendly and sympathetic enough just to listen, but I hesitated short of pressing it, realizing that elaborating on the details of this fight to anyone could arouse their suspicion about me and Charlie. Our secret would be in jeopardy. It was too risky, not worth the chance, and it just made me angrier with her. She managed to snare me into this scenario where I had literally nobody to talk to. If only there was somebody else, one other person in the entire world who knew about me and Charlie, and they could just sit there, not even listen, just nod and wait. I whispered to the empty elevator. Could there possibly be a worse person? And yet, I seriously was down to my last option.
Level 8 clearance required for dungeon access.
I pushed the lowest button on the elevator, the button marked D for dungeons, and I swiped my identification card out of my gym bag to confirm the clearance. Tyler Foon was the only person who knew about me and Charlie, except me and Charlie. Tyler Foon was the perfect place to dump. It was Monday. I had to talk to him anyway, or at least go look at him for a few hours, pretend to be giving him a chance before checking the reject box. This would be our 4th meeting, but meetings 2 and 3 were about as uneventful as you could imagine. I was still punishing him for the bitter taste in my mouth from the first one, so the 2 trips since to his lockup were essentially jokes. Both of those visits, I stood in front of the speaker, pressing down my button in silence as he wobbled across the cell, trembling and slow, exerting his feeble body to its full extent. All the while he was struggling, I was wondering why he did it. Why he tried so hard to get to that button to talk to me, but I figured it was the only time in his life anymore where something happened outside of his own head, and he couldn't ignore the 15 seconds of distraction. Both times, when he finally made his way over and activated his speaker, I flipped over the top pink page of my eval sheet and slammed it into the glass for him to read the large, unmistakable X, indicating my rejection of his status as fit to join Ava. The only difference between trip 2 and 3 was how Foon responded to my wordless rejection. The first time he just scowled, snapped his finger away from the button, teetered back to his cot, and flopped into it without further acknowledging that I was there. But a week later, he looked me square in the face, stern and serious, and nodded firmly. Like he knew this was the level of concern he'd so far earned himself, like he got the point that nothing about him warranted a second chance or even the opportunity to secure one. I was sure he understood why I didn't want to talk to him. I was sure he didn't want to talk to me. Well, today we'd talk, at least I'd talk at him, gauge his response while granting my own peace of mind, then reject him and leave. At least one of these rendezvous wasn't going to be completely fruitless. Look, it's not like I think we're even. I sputtered, slamming down both sides of the intercom system telekinetically and jerking Foon out of a sound sleep with an audible yelp. He tumbled out of bed, sheets draped around his dumbfounded face, but I was already in rhythm. I completely realized that if somewhere in the universe there's this big balance where if you put two people on it, it'll tell you which one does more for the other. If that exists and you put me on it with her, I know it's her. She wins. I'm not saying she doesn't blow me away in what she does for me versus what I do for her. I owe her everything I've got. I'm not completely delusional. And yeah, it's not just her killing people and me not. It's the whole thing, too. Like, I get that she's astronomical units out of my league. I know a girl like her shouldn't be with a guy like me. I'm not dumb, all right?
Are we talking about the thing that I'm not supposed to talk about?
He asked, eyes shifting about for some sort of context.
Rule 1, is this a test?
I ignored him, delved onward. But at least I try, you know? At least I try to help her help me. I just don't sit there like a petulant child with my arms crossed while she slays the dragons. Like, right up to the physically killing part, I'm right in there, deep in the thick of it. I help her fight. I think I actually fight pretty damn well now, don't I? You would know.
You got some moves, mate, sure.
He was already behaving better than I could have possibly expected or hoped. Still, I know that it should just be this given thing with us. Like, she brings home the bacon, I'm unemployed. So yeah, I'll do the laundry and the house chores because that makes sense. But then why does she have to act like I'm supposed to? Like, it's not that easy. Handling the press in Cranston and always saying the right thing and making people like us, it's not murder, fine. But it's not like, she can't just assume I'll do it for her. I mean, no, that's not, of course you can, and I will, because I get that's only fair that I do it, but I paused a moment to refocus my rambling head. I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah, you're feeling underappreciated.
He shrugged and smirked, like it was the most blatant thing he'd ever said.
I can't blame you for it. It's a little womanly from a classic patriarchal perspective, but I ain't like that. Not getting thanked for the things you do, getting taken for granted. It's a bollocks feeling.
Exactly, I exclaimed, noting his ability to delicately observe rule number 1 throughout his thoughtful concern. And then she... Actually, you know what it was? You know what was the second when I got mad, and then after that, it was just a shit show no matter what?
What was it? When?
He smiled genuinely, like he was actually interested to know. It was remotely disturbing, but I was sort of entrenched in my tirade. When she said, just do the commercial for me, I'll suck your dick later. Like, she hit them both, you know, both issues. Hey, your contributions to me on the publicity front are worthless, and you value sex with me more than I value sex with you. Just use it as currency. I mean, that's basically what she said, right? He shrugged non-committally, but empathetically as well. And then I'm all mad, but I can't say that. So instead I get on her about being flaky, which, don't get me wrong, she totally is, but I don't really care. And then she utterly out of the blue starts telling me I don't have the same zest for life anymore because I don't strive to, like, save people or whatever like I used to. And she's worried about the cleanliness of my soul, which is like, first of all, no idea where it came from. Second of all, probably a little right, but don't just tell me that in the middle of something else. And third of all, it turned out so well the last time I let my conscience interfere. I gestured an open hand in his direction, then realized it was kind of a dick move to make reference to the guy I was talking to as an example of the wrong person to let stay alive. Sorry.
Nah, it's fine.
It seemed a very poignant place to recognize the absurdity level that this conversation had attained. Then a rush of anxiety crept down my spine. Foon, you can't tell anyone about me and Charlie. He scoffed, finally pulling the sheet off his head with a shaky hand and easing back onto the edge of his cot.
Who am I going to tell, mate? The only person I've made a noise to in the last 2 years is you, unless you count the unbridled screams from the night terrors, but ain't nobody hearing those anyway.
I'm not joking.
And neither am I. I don't have half a good reason to tell, and even if I did, Charlie would run me through with a...
He stopped short, his ashen-buried eyes wide and aghast with apologetic terror, darting up from the hands folded and quivering in front of him to meet mine.
I didn't mean to say her name.
I nose-laughed, cocking an eyebrow in bemusement. I'll let that one slide. He nodded thanks, suddenly relieved. I leaned against the wall opposite his cell, tucking the eval papers under my folded arms. Sometimes it was hard to believe that 2 years ago this same wall was riddled with geysers, but I could hardly forget what followed that up, not while I was staring him in the face. Look, I gotta ask, why the sudden change in attitude? I mean, maybe I'm looking a gift horse in the mouth, but the first few times I came down here, you seemed pretty boorishly against the whole concept of these chats. What changed?
I don't know, mate.
He physically hoisted one scrawny leg, then the other, crossing them on his bed.
Thought about what you said a lot, how conditions in here ain't exactly the luxurious sort of lifestyle a gent like me had grown accustomed to, and this is a chance to get loose, granted, damn near invisible one, getting by this particular gauntlet of judges, but it's not like I'm drowning in better choices, right? Give it a whirl, play by the book, who knows? Little bit of hope, better than dying alone in here.
I chuckled a bit, impressed by his ability to take my words to heart. For that alone, not to mention the free therapy, he'd earned himself a real talking session, at least for today. Hell, I was supposed to be doing that anyway. I pulled out the pad of pink sheets and started filling in the logistics. That's a surprisingly mature perspective for you, Mr. Foon.
Oh, right. Sorry. Maybe I should throw in sod off, wanker.
And he lifted his first two fingers at me. I smiled. Yeah, much better. But in America, we just use the middle one.
Is that part of it, then? Do I have to be a good patriotic Yank, show my ill humor with half as many fingers, report all temperatures in Fahrenheit? Wait, what was it? 100 degrees today, maybe 2 or 3 million degrees, pending the hour?
It's February, Foon. It was like 39.
39? That comes a scorcher. Over here, it's freezing.
Not quite. Actually, it rained a bit this afternoon. Weather. The stereotype of small talk, but I guess we had to start somewhere. Plus, this was actually pretty fresh information for him being a prisoner in the subterranean dungeons.
Ah, the rain.
He reminisced longingly.
Like raw power falling from the sky. Manna from heaven.
Oh, right. I guess I never thought about that. Rain would be a pretty nice concept for you, huh? He nodded.
One day, you know. One rainy day. That's all I ever got.
You mean after you manifested? Hey, this is good. We're actually supposed to talk about this history and stuff. Tell me about that rainy day.
Sure.
He shrugged. Once he started, it was like I wasn't there at all.
First time I ever went blue, it was raining out on the prison yard. I thought I'd finally ticked off, went full metal. Every drop would stain me blue, and I tried to rub them away. When the guards noticed me scratching and clawing at my own skin like a psycho, they approached me to stop it. One of them hit me with his club. After I hit ground, instinct took over. I know what to do next.
He extended a feeble fist in front of him, mimicked the noise of a gunshot, then sadly smirked.
As that broke out. Whole time I was doing it, blasting the guards and the other inmates, I couldn't decide if it was fiction or not. Thought maybe that was just the sort of loony thing that'd be in me head from then on, best be getting accustomed. Wasn't before I hit the ocean that I discovered it was all real life.
I was still jotting it down when he stopped. What happened next?
Yeah, kinda boring. I stayed there for a long while, figuring stuff out and such, worked out a couple of good tricks pretty quickly. Then a month or two later, figured I'd make the best of my freedom. Go ahead and see the world. Found you lot when I hit land. Scrap broke out, freedom disappeared as fast as it came anyway. You know that part.
I suddenly stopped writing. It hadn't occurred to me before then that Foon may not have had antagonistic intentions the first time we fought. Between the forecast telling us we had to bust him and the detailed history of his crimes, Charlie and I just assumed he'd be looking for trouble. I guess if I replayed the battle in my head, I threw the first punch, tossing him out to sea. The rest was just retaliation. Maybe all Tyler Foon ever wanted was to escape.
How about you?
He raised his eyebrows at me, authentically curious.
What was your first time like?
No, don't. Don't think about him like that. Rewrite history from his perspective. This one was the easy one. This is wicked and broken. Quick review. He sucked Vasquez dry when he tried to set him free. He killed 30 plus people just to get our attention when he teamed up with Fly. All those prison guards and inmates, even if he did just think he was insane, he killed them. And he tried to kill me personally about 3 times. Plus, before any of that, back when he was just a powerless man, he murdered his wife for being unfaithful and then killed her daughter, a child, a little girl. Take away Beam, no anomalies, without any of that, he was still bad. Classic rotten evil. One somewhat pleasant conversation and a refreshingly mature outlook didn't counteract all of that. Hell, he was probably just deceiving me. He didn't get to escape, not this one. Not Foon. Sorry, I tried to reach for the remote one day. I eventually answered, preemptively ticking the box, rejecting his clearance to Ava for one more session. It was barely out of reach. I accidentally flung it over my head, broke a window.
You lazy sack. Couldn't even get up to fetch it, and that's how you discover your telekinetic. I fancy that's the most American thing I've ever heard.
And I let his laughter melt into a spastic cough, then let that cough melt into silence. Unwilling to throw him another bone, eager to end this because I felt dirty for starting it.
This is seriously how the process goes around here.
He asked when the quiet got too lengthy, reclining into the wall behind his cot.
Chat about the weather, troubles with the ladies, you get chummy, then decide if I'm sane enough to join the brigade.
We are not chummy.
Nah, I just
And
meant-
we're pioneering this particular process. I figured we'd be best to take it slow. There are other things we're supposed to cover, but we got all the time in the world for that. He nodded, indicating his recognition of my not-so-subtle implication that the whole thing was inevitably doomed to fail.
What sorts of things? Because I'm frankly already running out of topics, mate.
I flipped through all the pages like I didn't already know what was on them. There wasn't that many. Ability limitations, more history, backstory stuff, analysis of character, nature. We both started at that one. At least he knew he sucked.
Backstory, huh? You want to hear the old tales of me, kid in rural England, drunk, abusive papa? Maybe shed some light on why I'm such a creep.
Come on, daddy issues? I rolled my eyes. That's the line you're going with? Yeah, you might fit in around here yet. We actually got a box for that pre-printed on the form. All I gotta do is exit. You'll save my hand some cramps, I guess. He scowled, grumbling something too British for me to understand anyway, folding his arms, looking away. Maybe I struck a nerve, belittling his crappy childhood, but I think it was important personally that I kept striking Foon's nerves. I didn't want to let him lull me to sleep. I didn't want to start believing he was a regular person victimized by terrible circumstances. I wanted to keep him in that cage. The reprehensible savage, not salvageable, wicked and broken. Simple. You could tell me about those nightmares if you'd like.
Say what now?
You said the only time you ever make a sound is when you wake up screaming from a nightmare. What are you dreaming about exactly? He blinked into the distance, still folding his arms, unwilling to grant me an answer. I pressed the issue. Is it your wife? You're dreaming about the day you killed your wife and her lover, is that it?
Nope. Good guess, though. I ain't got a lick of remorse for that cunt. She got what was coming to her.
He didn't even flinch from his distant, spacey stare, but spoke with an arrogant twinge of confidence that he normally did, practically laughing. It assured me of 2 things. He was still, in fact, an ass, and this was the truth. It wasn't his wife, but I had another guess. It's the little girl, isn't it? Nothing. I'm pretty sure he even stopped breathing. Were his face not so gaunt and sullen, pale and skeletal, so that maybe it could demonstrate emotion? I think he actually would have looked sad. It was uncomfortable for me, nagging at an open wound, and for the first time since we had him hogtied on the beach, I felt pity for him. Pity was all right, I rationalized. Pity was not the same as forgiveness, even if it could be a first step toward it. Your wife's daughter, right? The girl you killed after you killed her parents. The nightmares are about...
You get one, I get one. Only fair.
One what?
Off limits.
I felt like a bully. Gone too far, back in the wrong direction. There was no reason to establish such an antagonistic undertone to these conversations if I was forced into having them. Truthfully, I discovered today he wasn't a bad person to talk to, as long as I kept it in my head that he was a bad person in a lot of other lights. Who was I to add to his torture? As long as the first thing I did every time I came down here was check reject, whatever we said to each other didn't even matter. Deal. Rule 2. No talking about the girl.
Sabrina.
He spoke like he was being gutted, like a pumpkin. Sucked dried of all happiness, and yet was obligated by some higher power to ensure I knew her name. Like saying it both made him glad that her memory lived on through him and sad at the sort of surrogate Sabrina was forced to cope with. Maybe he was just passing that torch on to me. Sabrina, right. I tried it out. Rule 2, no talking about Sabrina. I could tell by his distant eyes, shallow breathing, and the way his constant trembling had accelerated that his heart was far from in this anymore, so I mercifully pulled the plug. Let's call it a day, okay? This was a good start, actually.
Right.
It's a no, by the way. I actually have to inform you of my decision each time concerning joining Ava. It's a no.
Right.
He repeated, elsewhere and lost. I began to make my way to the elevator, but for the second time I realized I couldn't go with Foon in the state I'd left him in. I had to get him back to thinking other things, normalize his head. I had to end it on some topic other than Sabrina, out of mercy that I didn't owe him, but needed to start reminding myself that I had in me. I looked over my shoulder, telekinetically holding the speaker switches down again. Hey, Foon. You think I should talk to Charlie about feeling underappreciated? You think it'd be a good idea to mention it to her? He remained motionless, then breathed in deeply and lifted his gaze.
Well, you admitted yourself. You still think it's imbalanced in who does what for whom. Maybe that's the whole issue.
That's true. So what would you do, Tyler? He lifted his hands and massaged his face slightly, groaning just loud enough to hear as he tried to come up with a way to give me advice without breaking the first rule.
You're selling me a pie, and I'll give you £5, but you think it's worth 6 and you're out 20, so you want to fuck with me over a single quid, lose your only customer? Probably should just bake better pies.
Thank you for listening to The Beam Chronicles, a fiction podcast written and produced by me, MJ Dooney. I hope you've enjoyed book 2 so far. Email me for any reason, beamchronicles@gmail.com. I have money for art, if you want to make me some art. Social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, no idea what I'm doing, but that's okay. If you have not done so already, a 5-star rating on whatever platform you are using to listen to this would be downright swell. If you already did, thank you. All music and sound effects were sourced from the Epidemic Sound Library. Special thanks to Sergio Duarte for creating the cover art for this podcast, and thank you once again for listening.